I would have lived in peace, but my enemies brought me war. G'day BookTube, you're here with Nick the Renaissance Bookman, and I am super excited for this video. The most fun that I had in 2025 when filming these videos for BookTube was when I created a progressive reading vlog for Strength of the Few, the second book in James Islington's Hierarchy series. I conducted a progressive reading vlog where whenever I felt inspired, I would turn the camera on and I would tell you my immediate thoughts, where I was up to, what's just taken place, where I think it's going, some different theories that I had, some plot holes, but also some real strengths and things that I was enjoying. It was a lot of fun. And based on the interaction that I've had on that video, I think you had a lot of fun as well listening and following along on my reading journey for that. So I want to do that again. Now, the most fun that I had in 2025 when actually reading a book was when I was reading Golden Sun by Pierce Brown, the second book in the first trilogy of the Red Rising series. Pierce Brown is a master storyteller. That first trilogy is S tier. It is so much fun. The betrayals, the high stakes, the tension, the fight scenes, everything about it was just amazing. And so I have not yet given myself permission to read the next three books in the Red Rising series, starting with Iron Gold. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do 3 progressive reading vlogs of the next 3 books. And in fact, it'll end up being 4 because you absolutely know that I'm going to do it for Red God as well when that comes out later in 2026. Fingers crossed, if not in 2027. A little caveat, a little warning here. This is going to be full of spoilers.
Spoilers.
If you haven't read the first 3 books in the Red Rising series, being Red Rising, Golden Sun, or Morning Star, then do not watch this video yet. Please stop immediately, go and read those, enjoy those, and then come back and watch this at the same pace at which I read Iron Gold. I don't want to be the person who ruins your reading journey for what was the best trilogy that I read all of last year. And I read some terrific books last year. So I actually know very little about where the story goes from here. Obviously, as I said, spoilers are all over this. We see Darrow succeed alongside Severo, Mustang, and the little surprise at the end in Cassius, right at the end of Morning Star. And so we know that that story is all about overthrowing and the uprising. And then I suspect where we're going to go from here is all about the challenges in leading. So when you strike the head off any sort of organization, it leaves a leadership void in behind. There'll be infighting and people trying to fill that space. Who are we kidding? Do we really think Mustang is going to be able to fill all of that space that was left behind? The Ash Lord is still out there. There's a whole bunch of characters that are still on the loose that could threaten what Darrow, Mustang, Cassius, and Severo were trying to achieve right there at the end of Morning Star. And so I think that's where we're going to go. I also know that Lysander is going to be involved in the next ones. He was only 10 years old at the end of Morning Star, so he is undoubtedly going to play a role going forward. And the only other little tidbit that I have heard thus far is that whilst the first 3 books were all from Darrow's perspective, we get some multi-POV action. Some multi-POV. John Gwynne, I loved his multi-POV in the Bloodsworn saga, and so Pierce Brown, he's going to tap into a little bit of that as well. And that's all that I know thus far about where Iron Gold, where Dark Age, and where Lightbringer takes us. Everything else that I've learnt is from reading the inside Dustcolor. They call him Father, Liberator, Warlord, Slave King, Reaper. But he feels a boy as he falls toward the war-torn planet, his armor red, his army vast, his heart heavy. It is his 10th year of war and the 33rd of his life. 10 years of war, oh dude, I feel for you. A decade ago, Darrow was the hero of the revolution he believed would break the chains of the society. But the Rising has shattered everything. Instead of peace and freedom, it has brought endless war. Now he must risk all he has fought for one last desperate mission. Darrow still believes he can save everyone, but can he save himself? And throughout the world, other destinies entwine with Darrow's to change his fate forever. A young red girl flees tragedy in her refugee camp and achieves for herself a new life she could never have imagined. An ex-soldier, broken by grief, is forced to steal the most valuable thing in the galaxy, or pay with his life. And Lysander Alloon, the heir in exile to the sovereign, wanders the stars with his mentor, Cassius, haunted by the loss of the world that Darrow transformed, and dreaming of what will rise in its ashes. Red Rising was the story of the end of one universe, and Iron Gold is the story of the creation of a new one. Yeah, cool. So we learn a few things there. As I suspected, Lysander's going to be involved. Of course, Cassius is going to be his mentor. We saw that at the end of Morningstar, where Severo wanted to kill young Lysander to end the lineage right then and there. Ultimately, it was Darrow that said no. He's got just as much of Lorne's blood in him as he did the evil and wicked sovereign. And so Lysander walks away with Cassius with his arm around him. So that makes sense that that relationship has continued. And that multi-POV. So obviously we're going to see Lysander, the ex-soldier broken by grief, and the young red girl fleeing tragedy in her refugee camp. And I imagine Darrow's there. Surely we're not going to break away from Darrow. So we've got at least 4 POVs that we're going to explore. And that's all that I can tell you. And that's all I know at this point in time. If you've already read Iron Gold, I encourage you to follow along. Enjoy watching me discover this story, learn vicariously through me the things that I like and didn't like, and you can live vicariously through me in doing that. If you haven't read the first 3, what on earth are you doing? I've ruined a whole bunch for you just then. Go back and read those 3. Come along and join me. Until next time, ciao. Severo, summon the Howlers. G'day BookTube, you're here with Nick the Renaissance Bookman, and I'm excited. I'm 99 pages into Iron Gold, the 4th book in the Red Rising series. The first thing I want to say is multi-POV. I'm digging it. I really like it. I am enjoying getting to see some of the other perspectives. We're getting that opportunity to explore how the revolution has impacted other colors and other groups of people, whether they're on Mars or on Earth or out in space. And so I'm quite enjoying that. Now, revolution was never going to be neat. When Darrow chopped the head off the Sovereign, it was never going to be neat. There's a void to be filled, and other golds, other peerless guard trying to hold on to what they once had were always going to come in and try and fill that void. The Ash Lord was the obvious one because he was still at large post the attack on Luna. And you've always got the Rim. They were always going to have to fight the Rim at some point in time. Old mate Ra, whatever his name is, he knew that he was being lied to, and Darrow knew that he knew, and he was just not going to call him out on it because his pride was going to force him to act. So we're seeing the consequences of that, where Darrow and his team are potentially in this pincer grip from either side, or at least that's what they fear is going to take place. Just because someone is given their freedom doesn't mean that their life is suddenly going to become better. Perhaps life can be pretty good if you sacrifice a few freedoms. Interesting idea. I've got a mate who his wife is Chinese and her family members still live in China, and they have talked about what it's like to live underneath the Chinese Communist Party. And without going full political right now, his take is that provided you're willing to give up some freedoms. So, for example, his in-laws are both school teachers, and they are not permitted to travel away from China for reasons you can read between the lines. And he's like, but they're totally happy to do that because they live very well. They have great security. They live in a terrific area, and their future is quite set and settled for them. And he's like, the sacrifices required is just a bit of freedom that they have to give up. Now, talking to US audience, you will find that abhorrent. From me here in Australia, I am far closer to you guys than I am on the other end of the spectrum. So it's interesting. I'm sort of seeing that particularly through Lyria. Is that Lyria? I'm going with Lyria. Our new red perspective, how she has been liberated from the mines. She's been given her freedom as such, but what is she going to be doing with that? Like, the world is still in chaos, and she's not in a position to really take agency and be in control of her own destiny. She's just living in a refugee camp, like scrapping for every meal, fighting for her place in society. Is that freedom worth it for her? She would think not. So I'm finding that character really interesting to explore that idea. Is it worth giving up some freedoms for a little bit more security? Be it security both in a physical sense, but also food scarcity and a few other things like that. Purpose as well. Whilst they were mining, they had a purpose. They, in fact, believed that they were living for something far greater than themselves, helping terraform Mars. And so when you take that away from a group of people, that's interesting. So I like Lyria and her storyline as a result of that. She obviously has deep, ingrained disrespect and hate for Mustang as the Sovereign because of her apparent broken promises. I'm super keen to see if we create an environment where Mustang actually gets to talk to Lyria, because Mustang's greatest weapon from this point forward is going to be her voice of reason and her ability to communicate with people effectively and win them over through her voice. So I'm actually really keen to see if Pierce Brown can create those environments where people that we meet, they're disenfranchised by what has taken place and the revolution, are able to be won over by a conversation, by an argument, to see someone level with them, accept responsibility for some of their misgivings or some of their errors that they've made, but explain to them why and have them see it from your perspective. I'm super fascinated to see if we get that in Lyria. The next POV that I'll touch on is Ephraim. Ephraim? We'll go with Ephraim. Now, I might be an absolute fool here, but did we get to know what Trigg's boyfriend's name was? Like, I'm assuming Ephraim is that person. If so, cool. I'm keen to see what Pierce Brown does with someone who is holding on to a whole bunch of resentment and has not let go of loss in the past. This tormented soul storyline. I'm curious to see how that goes. I want to see Ephraim find a bit of resolution there. I want them to find a bit of solace, a bit of peace, and come to terms with the way that things are and move on despite the loss of someone that you deeply love. Because there are people losing loved ones all over the place in this world. Like, death is coming to absolutely everyone here, not just Ephraim, but we'll see from a very personal perspective for him. We saw that with Darrow, obviously with EO in the first one, and he came to terms with it relatively soon and was able to move on and find purpose and find meaning. We'll see if we can get that through another character. Now, I quite like this guy simply because I'm really quite attracted to competence and the way in which he was able to use his motley crew of bandits to steal the Lightbringer, the Razor. The way in which he was able to bring them together was reminiscent of Danny Ocean, the way that he leveraged and used all of their skill sets to his advantage, and it seemed seamless to be able to steal something that was so critical. So I really quite liked the competence that we saw in that character. Now, Lysander. I am really liking the Lysander storyline thus far. We haven't had a lot. I'm only 99 pages in, but I like that duo. I am a sucker for a mentor-mentee relationship. I am here for that storyline. And I'll be honest, I'm actually a huge fan of Cassius. I've been on Team Cassius for a long while. In Morningstar, where you've got that scene where Darrow and Severo, the rest of the Howlers, punch on into Quicksilver's tower and interrupt the peace negotiations, everyone's just like freaking out. Everyone except Cassius. He is just slowly moving and maneuvering his way through a crowd. Kind of gave off like big cat vibes, like a leopard or a panther or something. I've been on Team Cassius since then. So to see him take a really prominent role with Lysander and be that mentor for him and develop him and nurture him, I'm here for it. And I like what Cassius now stands for. When I was a boy, the day after the fall of House Loon, Cassius bent on a knee and told me his noble mission. Quote, "Gold forgot it was intended to shepherd, not rule. I reject my life and honour that duty, to protect the people. Will you join me?" And I quite like that. This is also what my books look like when I read them. I take the dust cover off, and I stole this from my wife, and it's got like this felt inlays which protects the actual book itself. So this is what that looks like. And then I have another present, but this one was actually from my wife. I stole this. She gave this to me, this leather satchel, which I then slide the book in to protect it whilst I'm out and about. And it makes me feel all sophisticated. So that's my book setup, by the way. So it looks a little bit funny, but I don't care. I'm reading a testosterone-fueled vengeance tour that is Red Rising. Mind you, this one feels a little bit different. This one is dealing with the consequences of past actions. I'm reminded of Hamilton, the musical, where the line comes from George Washington, "Fighting is easy, son. Living is harder."
Dying is easy. Young man, living is harder.
That's what we're seeing now, where Darrow's in a position where he and his team are having to lead the people now through this revolution, and they're struggling. They're struggling hard. Back to Lysander, one thing that I'm interested in is a tidbit that we got out of the Darrow storyline, where we heard that the people sing of only 3 people. Darrow, which makes sense. Ragnar, which also makes sense. But the third person is Lysander. I find that fascinating because the guy was 10 years old at the end of Morningstar. And like most gold children, were very much hidden from society. Yes, he was appearing alongside his grandmother, the Sovereign, all the time, but we didn't really hear of him, and he wasn't out there doing great deeds. He wasn't a young Alexander the Great leading armies by age 12. He was reserved and at home, and he's not that big blustering type. He's not the big fighter, the warrior. And then since then, like, a lot of people don't even know if this guy's alive. They assume that he could have just been lost to the war. We haven't really seen him in 10 years. So I find it fascinating that the people still sing of him and he's got this big, massive following behind him. I'm curious as to why. That didn't seem to make sense to me. So I am curious to see how Brown brings that back together and explains why the people respect and revere Lysander as much as what they appear to do. Because to put them up against Ragnar and Darrow, like that's a level of respect that I don't yet think Lysander has earned. So I'm curious to see why and how. But Lysander's obviously formidable. He's a good and competent fighter, I think, but not obviously as skilled and as natural that way, in that he was taught by Aja and he was taught by Cassius. He is a fierce intellect and understands what's going on in the world. He was tutored by his grandmother the entire time until he was 10, and now he's had a mentor in Cassius for the next 10 years. The guy quite clearly has a photographic memory. So he is a different type of formidable in comparison to Cassius and Darrow, who are all brute force, right? And like charismatic leaders charging through. You don't get that same vibe from Lysander. So I like that. He is more of a bronzy than a peerless scarred, but overall, like really enjoying that relationship they've got. I've also decided I love blues. Every single time a blue gets to be involved in the dialogue, I just enjoy it so much more. They are blunt, they are crude, and they have a really unique sense of humor. So I actually really like the dialogue when a blue is involved. And now on to Darrow. Oh, Darrow, so I like the multi-POV, but geez, you feel like you're at home whenever Darrow's on page. I expected him to rush to me like a lecturer, but he doesn't. And in that moment, a very sharp spasm of pain goes through the deeper part of me. Oh, Darrow, the weight of fatherhood is sitting heavy on you, and mate, I totally understand. I work in an environment where each year we have to do performance reporting. And whilst I'm not like an outright thruster, it is something that I take quite seriously and set goals and genuinely try and achieve them. Then I distinctly remember the year after I had my first child, my daughter, where my goals have gone from what can I achieve to, I literally said to my performance reviewer, I was like, how do I write down, how can I spend as little time at work without getting fired? And why? It's just because your perspective changed. Once you've got a child, once you've got a family, things absolutely change. You start taking less risks, or at least I did. You look at things from a different perspective. You start thinking about legacy and a whole bunch of stuff. And that's exactly what we've seen from Darrow and Severo to a degree, but less Severo, right? Darrow, we're seeing that, we're feeling that, and I feel it right alongside you as well, dude. Maybe one or two less iron reins might just be the first thing that you could do. Like just small changes. Maybe don't launch yourself out of a tube at 5 times the speed of sound. That could be a first step that you make about being a responsible father. So, but I feel that. I like this aspect of Darrow, seeing him mature, becoming a different type of person, because you do take on less risks as you get older. It would be inappropriate for him to stay as that 18 to 23-year-old the entire time throughout all of these books. Good fun, because we get more books like Golden Sun and Morning Star, where we just bounce from one Iron Rain to epic fight scene to mad battle with Aja to the next. But I'm keen for something different, and Pierce Brown is giving that to me so far. Now, Darrow, like Leonidas, King Leonidas before him, Darrow has gone and started a war without the blessing of the Senate. Now, this is going to have consequences, and we saw that right at the end of the section that I'm up to, page 99, where Severo, Rally the Howlers, he's about to be ousted. He's going to get put under house arrest or something similar. And he's like, hey, before you push me, I'm going to jump. And so I think we're going to get to see that small team go out again, like they were at the Institute, going out and taking the fight to the enemy and going hunting. I am keen for that because that's where Darrow excels. Now, that is a fully acknowledged indirect contradiction to what I just said about him taking less risks and being a dad and actually feeling the weight of that. But like, okay, I have a contradiction. Leave me alone. I want to go see this storyline where Severo and Darrow are out hunting, but I'm also equally enjoying the weight of fatherhood because I feel that myself. And so I like seeing that reflected in some of the characters that I read about. So I'm all here for this multi-POV. I like where this is going so far. There is still enough of the old for me to appreciate that. And it doesn't feel like a complete departure from what we saw in the first trilogy, but I like this new approach that we're taking from here. So Severo, Rally the Howlers, I am keen. Until next time, ciao. G'day BookTube, you're here with Nick the Renaissance Bookman, and I'm back for another installment on my progressive reading vlog of Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. I'm 195 pages in. I've just finished part 1 of Iron Gold, and Darrow, you've done gone messed up Aaron.
You done messed up, Aaron!
Mate, this is not good. You have essentially just severed yourself from the most elite fighting force that you had on your side in the Obsidians. I do not believe Sephi is going to be particularly forgiving, having just heard of you killing Wulfgar, who was essentially carrying the spiritual torch of Ragnar, holding the Obsidians and the Low Colours together, giving them something to root for and fight for. Yeah, this will hurt. This will have ripples, no doubt. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Darrow have to face off against Sephi at some stage. We'll see if that comes to fruition. I think Darrow will win, but she may take an arm with her. On the opposite side from that scene with Wulfgar, it appears that Darrow is back to his wielding way best. My most favourite scene that I've had in reading any of Pierce Brown would have had to have been the gala scene from right at the start of Golden Sun. Why? Because Darrow was essentially at the peak of his powers. Everyone still underestimated him. They thought he was this plucky young boy out of the Institute. And then he went and took the razor arm of their favourite son. And he just arrogantly took control of the entire room and just pissed upon all of their customs and took what was rightfully his. So I absolutely loved that. And yet, unfortunately, since Morningstar, since the box scene in Morningstar, Darrow has essentially been a bit of a second-rate fighter. Like, he's good, but he hasn't been at the pinnacle of razor warfare, right? Arja is undoubtedly better than him. Ragnar would have beaten him in one-on-one combat. Cassius was proving to be more capable than he was. And even Mustang, if you think about the fight scene at the top of Quicksilver's tower, she was getting the better of him before things happened to go in his favour. Obviously, 10 years of non-stop combat for Darrow, and he has gone from strength to strength. His ability to have excess capacity whilst fighting off 10 wardens and not actually have to resort to killing blows, to not resort to do or die, basically, I kill you before you kill me sort of tactics, demonstrates the level of excess capacity that he has and how he is now once again a step above the rest when it comes to his swordcraft. I've also decided that Cadax is just outright terrific. He turns to me with a mischievous smile. Sometimes, little one, it's best if the world thinks you are a little mad. He winks, inspiring what they'll let you get away with. Now, I just love that. Obviously, that's just after Cadax is talking with Lyria, and Lyria's like, I didn't have any candy in my pocket, you put that there. And we see all the time that Cadax has been that a little bit eccentric and a little bit mad throughout the first 3 books. And it just sort of shows that he's playing the long game. And so I really enjoyed that scene and the visuals there. And I'm picturing this giant of a man with a big, massive red beard and a bald head. I've decided, like, we always like the Telemanus family. Cavax is moving up in the world, right? Pax has obviously been the favourite for most people, despite having such a small role in the first book. But Cavax is doing well, so I like that. We're also seeing so many different political forces move within the shadows, and I feel like we are intimately familiar with, like, maybe one of them, and the rest we're just in the dark on. We saw in Lyria's point of view that there was a copper and a grey talking within a jam shield, and we just have no idea what they were talking about or what their intent was. We saw Ephraim get caught up with the underground force, and we understand that they are counter to what Darrow's trying to achieve and what the Republic stands for, because they are an old underground figure. But again, what their exact motive is, what their target is right now, we still don't know. I thought it was going to be Severo initially, but given that he's now going underground with Darrow, then there's no way that we would know about his 3 potential locations going forward. So it doesn't leave many contenders as to who they could be targeting. The Sovereign is obviously one, but I don't feel like that's it, which means there's only real one person that they're going to be targeting, which is going to make Ephraim out to be a bit of a monster. Because you kind of just don't target children, right? Like, that's not cool. I feel like that's where it's going, isn't it? I hope I'm wrong on that one, but we'll see. But how else to pull at your heartstrings than to make Darrow have to fight 4 packs, quite literally. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong on that one. And unlike his namesake in the Bible, I hope he is not fruitful in his endeavours here. And similarly in that vein, Seraphina out on the rim. She appears to be doing something, to be working for someone other than her sovereign, her father, because she did not have his blessing in leaving the way in which she did and how she was caught. There are other forces that moving in the shadows there that haven't yet been revealed to us. Now, I'm not quite sure if I was ever in the dark as much as what I'm in the dark right now in any of Pierce Brown's other writing. The first three, we were obviously all from Darrow's perspective, but I feel like we knew what was happening. Things happened to him that were outside of his control, but he had agency in his response. It was rare, if ever, that we knew who the bad guys were and who was the puppeteers behind the scenes. Whereas I don't feel like we know exactly who is pulling the strings right now. There are unknown forces and unknown characters maneuvering, and we're not yet privy to who they are, which is interesting. It just makes for a different style of read as we come across this. Now, there is another aspect of the Red Rising universe that I have long felt has been underutilized. And it first came to me when Darrow first went and met up with Lorne, trying to convince him to join the Sons of Ares. And it was in Lorne's Griffin. We got this impression he would have been some sort of formidable fighting force, like in a military setting, he would have been quite damaging, the Griffin, that is. And so they can carve human bodies. Why not carve more animals for military warfighting? And then we saw that in Lysander's storyline. A wet mucus-filled mouth snaps centimeters from my face. Scaled paws and serrated talons scratch the metal deck. I twist myself to see point blank the four-legged Kuon hounds. Insectoid canine hybrids. There are 3 of them, bred for war. I shudder away from the hound, trying to master my fear. It's impossible. Now, I thought I was going to see so many more of these type of mutated and hybrid animals, and we're finally seeing it for the first time. So I wonder if that's going to be a one of one, or if this is something that Brown actually explores a heck of a lot more going forward. I feel like people are often really afraid of animals. You put a person there and you sort of understand what it is that they can and cannot do, what they will and will not do. You put an animal, however, and there is a level of unpredictability there that makes you just that little bit more afraid. So if I was going and fighting these wars, why not just send thousands upon... Instead of Darrow and the Howlers conducting all of these iron rains themselves, send physical wolves that have really hardened skin and massive flesh-eating gold receptors in their claws or something that hunt them down and kill all these golds. Why not send Mickey on this sort of task rather than sending Severo and Darrow in these tubes every single time to go and fight their 4th Iron Rain at this point in time, if my count is correct? That would be a better use of your people, Darrow. Think laterally. It doesn't have to be you, Leonidas, spearheading every single fight. No, that's fine. I quite enjoyed watching you fight. Now that you're back to your wielding best, let's go. I also love the derogatory names that we have for all of the different colors. We've got the limeys, crows, rusters, tin pots, grass asses. You got bronzies, milkies, and penny fingers. I absolutely love this. I also feel like we're not going to be able to assimilate particularly well whilst we're still calling each other these types of names. But whatever, I'm here for the ride at this point in time. I'm not fully on the Republic side just yet. I do want to see a little bit more chaos before I get to their peace that's going to happen, hopefully in Red God or Lightbringer, whenever it comes. But until this point in time, sit down, Milky. And my final thought from this section, this next 100 pages that I've just read, is that the cell-killing plant, the flesh-eating plant that Lyria comes across when she's talking to the doctor, the scientist, essentially, when she's given the fox's poo, when she's collecting fox poo, Pierce Brown loves to drop these little Easter eggs that he will then use much later in the story. And he loves symmetry. Where we saw the Hamanthus oil that ultimately saved Darrow's life when he tried to hang himself, when he went and buried Eo's body, knowing that he was going to be hung. And Uncle Nero gave him the Hamanthus oil, and then we see that connection at the end of Morningstar where Severo goes and consumes Hamanthus oil, and that's pivotal in being able to take down the Sovereign. He loves this symmetry in what he's writing. So hear me now, quote me later. The Night Lily, as it is called, absolutely will come back and play a key role at some point in time. It will result in the death of a really key enemy. One of Diomedes. Diomedes will die from the Night Lily. Oh, it should be female, given that it reminded him of an old female lover that he had. Who have we got left? Who are the females left? You've still got... See, I reckon Seraphina is not going to be as evil as what she... It could be Seraphina. Maybe I'm just liking her because she seems to have a soft spot for Lysander. Okay, no, I'm going with Diomedes. It should be a female. It'll be a female, but until I figure out which female, Diomedes will die as a result of the Night Lily that we were introduced to in Lyria's storyline. Hear me now, quote me later. Diomedes will die from the Night Lily. Until next time, ciao. G'day BookTube, you're here with Nick the Renaissance Bookman. We're back for another update on that page 370. I am powering my way through Iron Gold. We've just discovered that Ephraim is an absolute jerk, that Darrow's playing with fire, and Cassius has just had his face ripped off in the presence of the Rim Golds. Stuff is happening, the pace is picking up. Up until this point in time in the book, I feel like we lacked a personal relationship with our bad guy. The Ash Lord has been set up to be our big bad, right? But he has come across almost like a bit of a faceless enemy. I'm not even really sure we've ever, across all 4 books now, we've ever had an actual conversation with the Ash Lord. He's just been this figure, this arm of the Sovereign in the first 3 that went and did bad stuff. He bombed things a while ago. I don't feel like we've ever developed a personal relationship with him, and that was something that this book was lacking. You compare that to the first 3, and you think about the Jackal, Aja, with Cassius and the Sovereign. Our relationship and hate of them was visceral. Like, it was a personal relationship that we had with them, and geez, we did not like them. I would personally kill the Jackal and not feel an ounce of guilt. Compare that to the Ash Lord, and I don't know, is the guy misunderstood? Does he have valid reasons? I don't know. I don't know him. So that was something I feel like we were missing, and perhaps that was intentional. Enter Apollonius, and he is exactly the level of despicable that we needed. Ephraim, yeah, dude, it just became personal. What you have done is not okay. Now, I anticipated that it could be Cadax. I feared that it was going to be Pax. But for whatever reason, the way in which you manipulated and abused and misused the innocent Lyria, okay, dude, it just became personal.
This is personal.
I'm not okay with this, and I hope someone stabs you at some point in time. In fact, I am quite happy to be strength of the few Galena and be an Edward Scissorarms and stab you myself. Not okay, Ephraim. I actually don't care that your boyfriend died in a previous book. I don't care. You've lost that empathy from me. I hope you die 1,000 deaths. If you manage to kill Sevro's daughter here, Electra, I'm not going to be okay with this. I'm not at all going to be okay with this. So the stakes were always high, but it just became personal with the arrival of Apollonius and the reveal behind Ephraim's double cross. Well done, Pierce Brown. This is exactly what we needed in Iron Gold from this point onwards. And for what it was worth, my heart rate was north of 160 during the scene in which the plane was seemingly falling out of the sky. I was leaning into the book. I was doing that thing where you cover the next paragraph so that your peripheral vision can't spoil what's going to happen before you actually get to it. With my elevated heart rate, that's a pretty good indication of nice writing. So well done, Pierce Brown. I really enjoyed that scene. Actually, I hated that scene, but it was good writing. You know what I mean. But occasionally I have felt that the writing's been slightly lazy, perhaps just leaning into too many stereotypes. And that's a bit rich coming from me because I really quite like stereotypes. But anyway, Lyria being stereotyped and abused by the police. Okay, sure. The Asian lineage of the Rimgolds, for example, as well, just seemingly to fit too neatly into Japanese Bushido culture, where the argument can be made, and it was made by Lysander, that as a result of that culture, it was inevitable that we had to drop a bomb, a nuclear weapon on Rhea to wipe them out. Grandmother despised most of the fops at court, and while I know she was not fond of Rimgolds, she did respect their stubborn fidelity to the old ways. It is the reason why she had my godfather obliterate Rhea. The hardest iron cannot be bent, only broken. And that is an argument that I have heard occasionally, and not sure I fully agree with it, but occasionally you have heard that about why the nuclear bomb was necessary in World War II. There was no surrender coming from the Japanese enemy. This was the only way that you could force their hand due to that Bushido culture. Having said that, I get it. I understand why using stereotypes is such an effective tool for an author to use. It allows you to add so much depth to your characters, to the culture, to the background with minimal word count. Our minds can fill in the gaps using our contemporary and earthly examples that we have for that stereotype. There are little things that Pierce Brown does. He loves drawing on little examples from history, and some of them are really obvious, but others you have to know, and some of them might not even be intentional, but I read into it that way anyway. Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, the citizens that were given authority over their fellow inmates, essentially, were known as the Blue Caps. These were the ones that were feared and ultimately I think were some of the most evil individuals throughout that entire era. The Greys that are abusing and misusing and mistreating the Reds in the street also had blue caps on. I found that interesting. I would love to ask Pierce Brown if that was intentional, if that was a throwback to the blue caps in Alexander Solzhenitsyn's work, or if I'm just reading into it too much. I don't know. I like that anyway. Now, I was waiting for Lysander to betray Cassius. I feel like we've just been led to believe, here it comes. We know he's got this deep ingrained hate. He killed his grandmother, for goodness sake. When is Lysander going to betray Cassius? We know that Brown loves a good betrayal, right? Like, that's his go-to thing. If in doubt, someone needs to betray someone and someone will die. And so I've been waiting for Lysander to do this to Cassius. Wouldn't it be the height of irony if he stays loyal to Cassius the entire time? That would be funny. It probably is. It's not going to be the case. Of course, it's not going to be the case. What's going to happen from here is that Cassius will no doubt just beat old mate. Oh, he's got a funny name. Bellaforina? Bellerophon? Or Ephon? Bellerophon? Cassius is going to slay Bellerophon and somehow manage to escape. And then Lysander will align himself with Dido, and they're going to come and just rain hate and discontent on Darrow right when he's at his weakest. And that's what's going to lead us into Dark Age. And I'll be honest, if Ephraim kills Sevro's kid, Electra, from here, I might just rage quit this whole series. Okay, that's not true. All right. I'm pretty keen to find out nonetheless. So time for me to go. I want to go figure out what happens from here. I want to watch Cassius destroy a dude, and then I want to watch Ephraim die at the hands of Cavax and not kill Electra, if that's okay. Until next time, ciao. She thought I would abandon my army, my fleet, and rush home to save my son. But she does not know what she has awoken. I pull the key Pax gave me from my neck and put it in my bag, setting aside the father, welcoming the Reaper, and letting the old rage take hold. Hey, Reaper, come out and play.
Warriors, come out to play.
G'day BookTube, you're here with Nick the Renaissance Bookman. I have just finished Iron Gold. That was all 596 pages, and that was the ending that we get to. Our boy is back. He's going alone. He's doing it without Sevro for the first time across all 4 books, and he's going on a warpath. Now, I will say that was a bit of a shocking sort of outcome for me. As a father, that is not how I was expecting Darrow to respond. The shock and despair that we get moments before that, okay, that's believable. But then leaving your son because quote unquote Mustangs got it under control, that one just didn't quite hit home for me. You're the Reaper of Mars. No one can do what you can do. I am very shocked that he didn't jump into a ship with Sevro, race across for all 4 weeks to go and kill absolutely anyone between him and his son. So that was a bit of a surprise. But I can't say that I'm totally disappointed, because I'm very interested to see where Brown is going to take this one when he's just going back to that rage that Darrow had as a Red right at the beginning of Red Rising, when he was just looking to be full of rage and kill people before he ended up embodying EO's dream and then the higher calling that he had. What I'll say right off the bat is that Iron Gold was a distinctly different book. It was much slower paced in comparison to both Morning Star and Golden Sun. And that makes sense. There are very few people that can keep up with the pace of Darrow. So introducing these multi-POVs where we get a Gold who much prefers to talk than wield a razor, a low red, and also a grey who prefers to work in the shadows and deliberate planning more than Darrow launching himself in a star shell. Star shell, is that what we call them? The thing with a tube where he shoots himself out into the bridge of another. I'm just going to embarrass myself here. Anyway, there are very few people that can do that. So when you look and compare those 2 books, this had very little major fight scenes. The final assault on the Ash Lord was largely the only epic battle that we had in this one in comparison to Golden Sun and Morning Star, that were on the same sort of levels of epic proportion as what those 2 books were. In this one, we got far more political intrigue. We got philosophical discussions. We got self-pitying and self-loathing from so many of our characters, and a heck of a lot less agency. Things happened to our characters rather than Darrow setting the pace and have him forcing actions upon everyone else around him. So it's a different paced book, but I'm okay. I don't think I had the stamina to take on another 12 Iron Rains. We had an Iron Rain in this one, and it was mentioned in passing, and I think that was appropriate. It was a good change of pace, and I like where we're going. So how I'm going to structure this one is I'm just going to name a bunch of characters, and I'm going to give you some highlights, some things that came to mind in the last 150 pages thereabouts since I've last spoken to you about Iron Gold. Apollonius. Was anyone else picturing King Xerxes from 300 when Apollonius was talking to his brother after Severo just fished him out of the pool? I was just picturing him just standing there. All I ask is that you kneel. I do not ask that you raise your shield.
I am kind. Everything you could ever desire, every happiness you can imagine, every pleasure, I will grant you, for I am kind. Embrace me as your king and as your god. Your joys will be endless.
I butchered that, but you get my point. This dude was a weird type of despicable. I didn't know whether to be impressed by him or fearful of him. I think Darrow is going to really regret saving this dude and letting him loose and not just damn his honor and just slay him and just explode his head from the inside. I think that's one that we're going to regret, which I'm shocked that he didn't do that as well. Like in that final fight scene, we saw Darrow just slaughter 12 blues who were realistically no threat to him. You could shoot the ship and achieve the same thing as opposed to slaughtering 12 blues and having their blood evaporate into the air, an iron mist. So you saw the level of devastation that Darrow was willing to cause, yet he wasn't willing to kill Apollonius. His name obviously didn't come out of the death hat in that final scene. Apollonius, hear me now, quote me later, will be responsible for the death of someone that we love. Be it Pebble and Clown, both of them combined, or will it be Victra? I think either of these two different, so the pairing or Victra just by herself, Apollonius will kill one of these two people. And why? Because it will successfully drive a wedge between Severo and Darrow. And I think that's what Apollonius's role is going to be. Because Severo made it clear to Darrow that this was a crappy plan and we should not be doing this. So I feel like that's going to come home to roost and really drive a wedge between these two before they eventually come back together. Or maybe they never do. And that's okay, because friends fall apart because you go and get their wife killed. That makes sense. And it's okay if you kind of don't ever forgive that person. On to main characters that apparently died. Cassius. There is zero chance in the world that Cassius is dead. We didn't get to see his body. We got no closure there. And Lysander kind of just abandoned him and took everybody's word for it without ever actually getting proof of life. Rookie is all I'll say about that one. Now, Cassius is definitely not dead. Diomedes is absolutely sheltering him, nurturing him back to health. And Diomedes is very much shaping up to be the Cassius of this next storyline. Someone who, for much of it, I feel will be fighting on the other side and has really staunch moral beliefs, but ultimately there is something there that he disagrees with his whole society in regards to, and he will come around. The only thing that I could think that it was just that one little tidbit we got through Lysander where Diomedes' eyes lingered on the pink for too long. And he's like, that means something. I'll come back to that later. We never came back to it. And I think this was the same pink that you saw that moment of relief in her eyes when Lysander elected not to do what all golds do and conquer their pinks. So I can't help but feel that those two pieces that went unanswered are connected. And that will ultimately be what the turning point is for Diomedes. Through love for a low color, he will end up being an abolitionist and he will end up fighting for low colors. And I think that's the role that Diomedes will play. And I think Cassius will be there right beside him. Those two fighting side by side, I don't think any other pairing and across the entire galaxy, I don't think that pairing across anyone across the entire galaxy would be able to defeat them. And so that would be a fun pairing. I would root for them probably more than I root for Darrow or Severo. I'm not sure if that's what I'm meant to be doing, but the honor and what those two gentlemen stand for, I kind of get around that. Darrow sort of pushed me off the edge a little bit. Like, dude, you do not abandon your son in the way in which you did. You don't treat Severo with so much disdain like you do. And Severo, you don't treat your team the way that you do. I'm not a fan of the belittling. Humans are still humans. You need to pick them up from time to time. You need to make them feel welcome and part of the team. Emotional intelligence is low on Severo's part throughout much of this book. And it kind of frustrated, it grinded on me a little bit. So back to Lysander. I really enjoyed getting to know the Rim Golds through Lysander's storyline. But Lysander himself, he still remained much of an enigma to me. What I don't understand, and I haven't hit the I believe button yet, Pierce Brown, is that Lysander has been mentored by Cassius during his most pivotal teen years, from age 10 through to 20, which is where you do all your growing, all your developing. if I think about the person that I am, it's not because of things that happened to me before I was 10. Yes, some of them have had a say, but I strongly believe it's not even 10 through 15. It's like 14 through 18. The things that took place then, the risks that I took, the battles that I got in with my mates, those are the things that have shaped the person that I've become. So I just really struggle to believe that Cassius was unable to win Lysander over and have him come around to his way of thinking. I don't quite believe that, but anyway, Lysander's there, just being a staunch stoic to his original founding beliefs. Like, good on you, I guess. I'm not sure if I like the guy. I don't think I'm meant to like the guy, so I guess that's being successful. We'll see where it goes. It's interesting. I actually like Lysander's storyline, not for Lysander, but all the people that we got to meet and see around him. I found them so much more enjoyable than him as an individual. I found his voice grating at times. Anyway, you can't like absolutely everyone. Lysander I didn't like, but I loved the storyline that he was involved in. Now, Lyria. Pierce Brown once again proved that we cannot have nice things.
This is why we can't have nice things.
For whatever reason, I actually really quite liked Lyria's unique mix of indignation and innocence. She was us in this storyline. As much as we want to believe that we are the peerless guard and we're going to be fighting there alongside the sons of Ares and leading in iron reigns, we're not, right? Like, we are the characters in this story, much as the way we are the characters in our real world that are just downstream from all the decision makers, all the trade embargoes, the invading of Iran and the subsequent effects on global logistics and supply chain networks. We are downstream from that. The law reforms, those that are in positions of power are not us, are not you and me, right? Sitting here looking at YouTube. That's not our lot in life. We are the Lyrias. We have very little capacity to influence and change those big world, big picture sort of decisions. All we can do is make a decision. Do we do what Lyria did for much of this storyline and wallow in our own self-pity and just get angry at the world and pissed off all the time and do little more than have a potty mouth? Or do we accept our reality and take control of what we can control? Because as much as our freedoms and our ability to influence the world around us are taken away from us, as much as those freedoms are taken from us, we still retain at all times the freedom to choose how we're going to respond. No matter what people do to us, we get that choice. That is a freedom that no one can deprive from us. I liked watching Lyria go on that journey, and geez, I didn't think she was going to get there. Because most people in the world don't get there. They stay in this small-minded, pissed off sort of approach. Woe is me, I'm a victim of everything going on around me. And that was what Lyria was doing for most of it. And it was grating from time to time, not going to lie. However, seeing her come through that and ultimately through Mustang's humility, realize that she can control what she can control, and she was going to, damn the consequences, take ownership for her actions, take ownership and responsibility for the mistakes that she has made. And that is something that we can do. We can choose how we're going to respond to those situations. So for that reason, I liked Lyria. I liked what she brought. She was an honest reflection of the consequences of Darrow's revolution. Now, coming back to Mustang, I was wrong. I thought, yep, hear me now. Don't tell my wife I said that. I said the word. I was raw. Can't get it out now. It was a one-time only. I was wrong, right? I thought we were only going to see Mustang through Darrow's POV, but not at all. She played just as a key role, hearing her voice as we did in Golden Sun and Morning Star. And it's ultimately her voice that is now going to be the most powerful weapon for her. She remains Odysseus. It's not her sword that does all the singing. It's her voice and what she stands for. We saw that moment of humility and how it influenced Lyria's story. And I essentially called that, I think, like that's what I was picturing. Soon my boy will be back with me because you were brave enough to own your mistakes. I must now own mine. I do not deserve it, nor must you give it, but I ask all the same. Will you forgive us? Will you forgive me for not doing better? This is a prime example of Mustang using her most powerful weapon, her voice. I'm keen to see her continuing to do that. She's a formidable fighter. We saw that at top of Quicksilver's tower, but I don't think that's her role, and I'm totally okay with that. Ephraim, you're dead to me, bro. I do not forgive you. You cannot kidnap young children. They are off limits. That is not okay. I don't care what you do from here on out. You're dead to me. You are off the Christmas card list. I do hope Cadax comes and removes your arms from your body. A little bit extreme. Let's see if you can redeem yourself. I'm not holding my breath. Every now and then as well, I'm reminded of the scale of Pierce Brown's world. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but because all our protagonists are essentially human, right? That they are human in appearance and in voice and in bodily shape and emotion and actions. I forget that the Golds aren't merely just competent humans. These genetically modified superhumans. And we get these small little tidbits to remind ourselves of how inferior we are in comparison to the Golds and the Peerless Guard. In Morningstar, it was that moment where Victra was benching 300 kilograms for reps. Yep, that was the moment that I was like, check, I am not the same thing as you are. And in this one, it was the apparent outsized response to a single sniper where Severo leaps 30 meters in the air. There's another tidbit, and fires a 0.5 megaton nuclear warhead at a single sniper. To put that in context, like 0.5 megaton, that is 500 million kilograms. The nuclear bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima at the end of World War II, that was 0.015 megatons. And we just hand launched a 0.5 megaton warhead at a ridgeline. Pierce Brown is not playing on the same scale that you and I are playing. Okay, so overall, I thoroughly enjoyed Iron Gold. This was a change of pace introduced through the multi-POV pivot. And I liked it. I loved Darrow's voice, and I loved the breakneck speed that he operates at. And I still think I will enjoy this rage and vengeance tour that he goes on in the next books. However, I liked seeing the consequences of his actions through the eyes of others. We were Lyria in this storyline. Some of us have been Ephraim, where we are just pissed off and we can't forgive. Like, if anything, that was a message in of itself. You need to forgive. You need to let go and move on in your life. So I liked introducing these different storylines. Interestingly, like I said with Lysander, I just didn't like this guy. Didn't like him as a character. I liked his storyline. Just didn't like him, which is interesting. But Darrow in particular, in the past, we've seen him struggle with purpose. We then saw him struggle with the weight of leadership, and we saw him struggle with his own mortality when it came to Morningstar. And this time we see him struggle with the burden of fatherhood. And that felt genuine. That felt real. As someone who is a dad of 2 kids, they weigh on you in all your decisions. My risk tolerance has gone through the floor as a result of having kids. So that kind of makes sense. It's interesting that he's been able to compartmentalize that component of him in that last sentence of this book, put that into a pocket and just go on his vengeance tour from here. He, instead of being like Severo, who is quite clearly prioritizing his inner family unit, Darrow is choosing to emulate his father. He is saying, I'm going to put the mission first and just trust that Pax will understand. Trust that he will be able to look after himself like I did and figure things out. Unlike how Lyria did for most of this story. But ultimately she's going to get there through the voice of others, through the voice of reason from people like Mustang. Now, I doubt that Brown is going to take the relationship between Darrow and Pax this way, but I think it would be so much more genuine if Pax doesn't understand. If there is a permanent rift, I think that would be far more genuine. It wouldn't be enjoyable to write. And I think for us as readers, it would be about as enjoyable as eating in a bucket of cockroaches, right? To read that as well. The sorrow that we will experience through that is probably befitting of the title Dark Age. Now, I don't think that's why we're getting that title. I think many of our people that we love are about to die, because that's something that I'm a little bit nervous about. Not many of our beloved characters died in the making of this book. Just tells me that hat of death is getting pretty darn full. Names like Pebble, Clown, Victra, Severo, Mustang, Cassius, like proper dying. These names are just piling up to go into this hat of death. And I fear how many times Pierce Brown's going to pluck his hand in there to pull out a name that we just quite like and go, oh, I wonder how I'm going to kill Victra. As long as he doesn't pull out Pax and Electra, he probably will. That'll be pissful, yeah. Okay. I guess he can kill a child or two if you have to. Or not. Pierce Brown, or not. That's an option too, dude. You don't have to do that. Anyway, I just fear that a whole bunch of the names of which we love, 50% of them are not going to make it to see Lightbringer. Overall, this was a solid A. I liked the introduction of the multi-POV. I don't think Pierce Brown nailed it, and I'm trusting that he will get better as a writer as he does his next one. If I compare that to John Gwynne, I think John Gwynne's pacing throughout his Bloodsworn saga was much better. Each of his points of view were kind of firing on the same number of cylinders at the same time. in comparison, we went from Darrow and Ephraim, a whole bunch of action, back to Lyria as she was self-loathing and self-pity and pulling apart dog poo. So it was a bit jarring at times. I'm trusting in Pierce Brown to get slightly better at that sort of consistent pacing across his POVs. But I like the change. I like where the story's going. I love that Darrow's about to go on this vengeance tour again. I'm all for it. Let's go with that one. Overall, this was really enjoyable. Let me know in the comments. I'm keen to hear whether or not you enjoyed a particular POV more than the others. And you can't just say Darrow. I know you like Darrow. You're on to the 4th book. It's a given that you like Darrow's storyline. Who of the remaining 3 did you enjoy? Were you able to get behind Ephraim? Am I being too harsh? Did you like Lysander for Lysander himself and not just the characters that were around him? Were you able to deal with Lyria's self-pity and that loathing? Were you honest? Be honest. Did you see yourself in Lyria? I saw you in Lyria. We'll see if you see you in Lyria, if you can be that honest. And take on a bit of the humility that Mustang shows and acknowledge that you are downstream from the decision makers. You don't have as much agency as you think, but you do get to choose how you respond. Overall, I loved this. I can't wait to jump into the Dark Age and Lightbringer. Some people that I really respect have said that these are 2 of their most favourite books of all time. I can't wait. It's exciting. It's Christmas morning, essentially. Let's get after it. Until next time, ciao.